Welcome, everyone. This is our bi-monthly human resource meeting. It is May 4th, 2023, 10 a.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. In attendance are Commissioners Brooks, Matari, and Duncan. Are there any changes to the agenda besides moving items around?
That's the only item we have, is to move 1 to after number 9.
And then I was also going to move 11 before 10.
Okay.
So, all right, so number 1 we will handle when the director gets here. So,
my intention is to withdraw number 8 on the agenda regarding my office.
number 8, okay?
Just make sure we're talking about the right number 8. It's the increased
Yeah.
spending.
Yes.
for witness statement.
Yes. All right, item 2, overlap pay request juvenile probation. Director Alexander.
Thank you, Commissioner Brian Alexander, Juvenile Probation, for the record. Yeah, looking to get approval from the board today. We have our senior secretary. Luckily for her, she gets to retire at June 30th. We're happy for her, but the downside, she's been with us for 16 and a half years. So very knowledgeable in that position. There's a lot of day-to-day operations that go on that position. So looking to hire the replacement and give a 30-day overlap for that position for training. So with the pay difference, it would be an increase to this year's budget about $3,300. But it would be about a $7,900 decrease next year. And then we have currently approximately 47,000 salary savings to date. So it would be an actual savings and remain budget neutral for that.
Okay. Any questions?
No questions.
Just curious, 30 days seems like a lot.
It is, but again, it's a vital role that she plays. She does a lot of transcription work for our social investigations. She signs up all the social orders with the families, as well as payroll, pay batches. So there's a lot of different work, and just want the opportunity to get as much exposure in that position before we lose that 16 years of experience. So we don't have any hiccups in that transition.
Okay. Motion?
I move that we approve the overlap pay request in juvenile probation.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. All right. Motion approved.
Thank you.
Item 3, parity increase request, community development.
Good morning, Commissioners. David Callahan, Community Development Director. This seeks to remedy a disparity we have between 2 planners that have been with us 4 to 5 years and new planners that have been hired in that now are making $3,000 and change more than the older planners. So this is a theme you've seen me come before you at least 3 times before. This is a repeat performance, just really seeking to even the playing field with our existing planners and our new planners.
Why isn't this noted when the new people are hired?
What do you mean?
So if you're going to hire somebody, do you not look to see what other people are making?
Oh, we absolutely do, but the answer to your question is we hire in what we think we can get people to accept.
Right, but
And that so far has been exceeding what people are getting paid that are with us.
right, but how long has this, like the hiring of the new planners versus you catching this?
How long has it gone on?
Yes.
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at the math of it.
Okay. I guess that's just my concern when you're going to hire somebody, to look at what everybody's making and address the issue when you're hiring somebody instead of, I don't know how long it's been. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. If you're going to hire someone tomorrow, make sure that you
I
address
don't
the other
disagree,
issues.
but I think fundamentally the basic problem is we haven't had step increases for 20 years.
Sure. Yep.
Didn't you say recently that all your positions were filled?
Yes,
So whatever you're doing, that's working.
that much is better.
Okay. Does it have to do with pay?
One would hope.
All right. Questions?
Are there any other parity issues in your office that might come before us later that you're aware of?
I was thinking all the rest of them would be fixed with budget requests.
Yeah, okay.
We have some things we've talked about where we'd like to go from a code enforcement level A to B and that sort of thing, but that would be a budget request.
Okay.
And then Sylvia, do any of these look at federally protected?
No, but I did evaluate the parity issue for the two that he's requesting, and the step appears to be a parity issue that
Okay.
needs to be addressed.
Okay, perfect. Further questions or motion?
I move that we approve the request of community development to correct a parity issue for Planner 2. It should do it.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Yes. All right. Item 4, request for additional full-time employee and overtime with the airport. Phil?
Commissioner Phil Cummings from the airport, for the record. I apologize, I didn't get the hand up.
Oh, all right, and then make sure you press your microphone. Oh,
I've got it
looks
on.
like it is. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Historically, the airport's maintained a $30,000 overtime budget for, mainly for snow removal. That's our heaviest time of year. This year, we've got two projects finishing up, and 2 FAA projects will be getting underway about August. Excuse me. Currently, we're about $12,000 over our overtime budget, which was only $6,000. I realize this has been a problem for the past few years. I think they lowered it before I retired. It needs to really be put back up, I believe, to the 30,000. The winter maintenance at the airport, we have a set of standards out there. Everything inside that fence is regulated by the federal government as to how high we can have the grass, how low it has to be cut, how the snow is piled. When I returned here in February, the criteria at the airport for snow removal wasn't being in compliance, simply because they were trying to stick to their timeline and they didn't have enough for overtime. That's caused a lot of problems at the airport the past few years. I would like to correct that, and I think one of the things we need to have is the flexibility to do our job and do it to the federal standards, and that's going to require some overtime. The last thing I want to do is have to tell somebody, well, we're going to shut the airport down because we don't have time to maintain it. We don't have the budget. I don't think that's a just reason. As far as the position, I've talked to the board before about trying to bring one of the individuals up as a second. And with all due respect to HR, I understand your opinion. However, at an airport this size, the first thing I would do walking into the airport is want to know who the second is. It's a busy airport. It's grown a lot in the past 2.5, 3 years. Why the previous director didn't have a deputy director, operations manager, I don't know. However, the airport is way too busy to have one guy be the ringleader.
Right, but we're not addressing that right now. We're just addressing your new, maintenance or,
The overtime budget? Okay.
yeah, overtime budget and then the airport specialist.
Right.
An additional specialist. Right. So we cured the other thing by saying temporarily that person is assuming the role of second until we get into budget and are able to address it.
Right,
There.
but I need to replace that position as an ops position at the airport. Because now I have a crew there's 2 on it, not 3.
Okay.
So I'm trying to bring in at the bottom, the base position
Sure.
as operations to fill that vacancy on the crew.
Okay.
So I'm trying to bring things up to step, and when we look at the savings from, the difference between what you were paying the former director and what you're paying me, the vacancy of Linda's position at her rate. And we've got some, I didn't go through this with Brandy. We were getting it last minute done here this morning. Brandy went through this with Kim. I can't say we're gonna be budget neutral this year with that increase. It doesn't look like it's that far out of line, but we don't know what our revenues are gonna be either.
Right, but it still appears for projection that your revenues are going to cover this additional
Correct.
ask going forward. With the additional of another person, wouldn't that reduce your overtime? If you have a whole other
It
body?
has the potential to. However, all you gotta have is one bad winter. And not that we always spent the 30,000 in the past. We averaged probably between 20 and 25,000. Now, understanding that maybe we can get by with 20,000 with that ops position filled. I'm willing to go that route, but I don't think $6,000
Sure.
for 7-day-a-week crew to maintain that airport, especially in the winter.
Right.
It's not even come close.
Do you see yourself using the overtime at all for the balance of the year?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, we've got 2 FAA projects finishing up. Those aren't as in-depth, but we've got the pavement maintenance project on the north side, and then we have the rehabilitation of the main runway. Those are involved projects. We still have to get our work done, but for those projects, we're gonna have to have people assigned to those for the safety of the airport. That's part of our responsibility.
And that's while they're working on, the contractors are working on the airport?
That is correct, yes.
Oh, okay. And you think that'll be another $24,000 in overtime request?
Well, that's why I asked for 30.
Uh-huh.
You know, we're looking at going into the winter and covering both of these projects.
Well, the winter will be
Nope.
October 1st, so it'll
That'll
be
be
a
a-
different
Correct.
budget.
It'll be your budget.
And we can work on that during the budget cycle. So I would probably be more comfortable approving a lesser limit right now, just because we don't have winter for
Understand.
hopefully 6 more months. You never know, it's North Idaho. So that's kind of where I would go until you and Brandy can make sure that the revenues are going to cover this, just so we know that information. And then if you end up, going through it, I'm sure your liaison will have you bring it back before us.
Yeah, fair enough.
So what do you think is, so you've spent 14 already in overtime?
I believe we're at 12.7 already.
Okay, so 13. So I would just say I'd be comfortable with another 7,000 in overtime to bring it 20 for this year, just to cover the bases.
Will that cover you at least for a little while, and if you need more, you can come back before us?
Well, I think we can make that work.
Okay.
Yeah, if we run out, I'm gonna come back.
All right, well then let's do that, at least for, try to get through the balance of this year.
All right, so a total of 20,000 for overtime, and then regarding the FTE, which I still believe the revenues are going to cover that, so it's not going to be a general fund issue. So,
Now, which position is this exactly? Is this the operations manager or a support specialist?
Yeah, he's an operations specialist.
So they'll work under the operations manager?
Yes, he will.
Okay. And this is just for one shift?
Correct.
Okay. And can you explain a little bit more why why you want to have that position? Because you got 2 shifts during the week, so this will only fill one of those shifts. Is that correct?
Correct. The operations manager, or the second, is a 5-day-a-week position. Whereas the crews they're working 4/10, so Wednesday is the only overlap. And to keep the continuity between the crews, for somebody to keep tabs on the projects and keep them running smoothly and running forward and assuring that the standards are being met not only on our airport duties, but our responsibilities to the project. And if I have to do all of that, it's gonna get a little thin. Something has to suffer. And I
So
don't wanna
this
see
is
that.
your assistant director position, basically?
Correct.
Okay.
You choose to call it operations manager, but it's basically the second in command at the airport, yes.
Do you want more time to think about it? We've got another HR meeting in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I've had discussions about it before. You know, I'm always reluctant to try to, tell people how to do their job because they're the ones responsible for it. On the flip side, it's a mid-year request. So it's just one of those things that it's much easier to look at it from the overall budget than it is to do it mid-year. And I'm just wondering if we can't get through at least the balance of this fiscal year before doing that. And I recognize the challenges, but it does make it a lot easier that way to do this. Unless, you're discovering a lot of additional issues, it's taking up a lot of your time, and you're not able to, run the operations of the airport like you would, it should be done as you see fit.
Correct. Well, so they haven't had an operations manager since I retired. Deputy director, you call it what you want. And yes, we found a lot of things that are gonna start consuming a lot more of my time, especially with some of the things that have come up recently. And there are issues that have to be addressed with the FAA for us to maintain our fundings for our projects go forward. And I'm not gonna have the time to do that and take care of the day-to-day operations on a 5-day-a-week basis and trying to overlap the crews. It's not efficient.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
The only other concern I have, we haven't spoken about this, but we're looking at eventually having a full-time permanent airport director. And it's not uncommon when you fill that position that person wants they want to pick their own go-to person, their number two. And from my understanding, you're thinking about filling the number two position from within. Is that
That's
correct?
correct, yes.
Okay. So could that not open up the door where that number two person may not make it because the new airport director, the permanent one, may want a different person? Does it open the door up for that?
Well, it's always a possibility. You had a
Yeah.
director come in after almost 30 years of having an airport manager and an operations manager, which morphed into an airport director and a deputy director, he didn't have a second. And it caused some problems. It caused some issues out there, as well as I know there was some displeasure with communications with the board.
Right.
The biggest problems were the maintenance issues with the standards at the airport. Right. I've been in this industry 37 years, and it was very painful for me to come back and see how the airport was being maintained snow-wise. They weren't even close to meeting the standards. It's unfortunate, but that's what I found when I got back.
And you're referring to FAA standards, is that correct?
Pardon?
When you say standards, are you referring to FAA standards or?
Yes.
Okay.
Once I got with the crew and explained to them and showed them the federal AC and how we're supposed to do our job, they realized they weren't even close.
Right.
So, and I can't speak to the how or why, but you want the airport to go forward and you want them to keep giving development money to the airport, which it needs it because of the growth, obviously. You still have to follow the standards.
Right.
When you don't follow the standards, the liability falls on the county. So if you want that liability, that's fine. That's up to you. But I wouldn't support that. And if that's how you want me to maintain the airport, I'll go back to being retired.
Well, I think that we're kind of talking about two separate things here. if you need an extra body right now or you need an extra body in the winter. So I think, and it's separate from the number 2 position because we've already authorized somebody to act in the number 2 position. So you have that support right now.
Correct.
Right. So I guess that's kind of where I'm a little bit stuck doing a mid-year position, because to Commissioner Matari's point, if we're going to hire this permanent director, I want to make sure that there's not, any of that conflict if they want to bring in their own number 2. So,
Well, I think you're seeing something that probably isn't there. I've been around airports for a long time, and most airport managers that have any kind of a background that walk into an airport the size of ours, the first thing they're going to ask is, who's the second?
Mm-hmm.
You operated for how many years in an airport this big without a second? That makes no sense in the industry. It's also dangerous because something suffers, and it has.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
He was very good at what he did, but in my assessment of what I saw when I came back, he wasn't as concerned about the things that we're responsible for. And snow removal that's a big issue in the winter. Safety and participation in the projects like the 2 we have coming up starting in August is also important, because that's part of our responsibility when we sign the sponsors' assurances to
Right.
take that money to do those projects. We have to keep up with our part of that agreement. We still have the airport to maintain. And it's gonna be awful, well, I'm not really sure how we're gonna do it, being short the personnel that we have. I mean, that one person makes a lot of difference when you're trying to maintain a balance on what we do.
There's a number of other issues at the airport that I know you're going to be pretty well addressing. It's going to take up some of your time. And I think that, clearly that's the way the airport was being run before, right? With an operations person, an inside person, and then the outside person. I don't know how it ended up becoming where it was just one person running the airport. But I do think that perhaps maybe in another meeting, because it's not appropriate for this one, that the board get brought up to speed with some of these other issues. And then you'll have a better sense of the world as to, why this request is being made. And do you think that we could give it 2 weeks and bring this back? And we can bring up these other issues before the board and then address this again?
I would agree with that. We're gonna have a lot better idea how in-depth these other issues are gonna be I can't talk about today.
sure.
Correct.
Okay. So let's get that meeting scheduled then. And maybe we can combine it with that ALP, the overall look that we talked about a couple weeks ago. And then that way in 2 weeks, we can have a good solid decision at the next HR meeting. Is that,
Yeah, and it'll be clear, I think, at that point.
okay,
Because there are some issues that have occurred, I think that with a little more attention to what was going on, we wouldn't be, about to deal with it, so.
yeah, and Phil and I just discovered another one yesterday,
Yep.
so,
And again, that's my reasoning for one.
Yeah. And it's good reasoning. I think there needs to be a little more information.
I'm all for saving the county money,
Yep.
but I still want things done properly because technically the airport belongs to the county, but it's still federally regulated. They read the rule books and they sign the checks. We just have to comply.
Yep.
all right, so we still have the issue of the overtime, so if.
Do you want me to make a motion?
Yep.
Okay. So I move that we move the additional full-time equivalent to another HR meeting and approve an increase in the overtime budget to a total of $20,000 for fiscal year '23.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. All right,
Thank you.
another FTE request with the prosecutor's office. It's item number 5, and Mr. Mortensen.
Good morning.
largely, with a few exceptions, the prosecutor's office operates on a 2-to-1 ratio between its attorneys and legal assistants. Looking at the current authorized attorney positions in my office, we are short 2 legal assistants. The reason why this hasn't been brought to the board before is because my office has not been forced to deal or work through this issue due to understaffing. As the board may know, over the years, we've been short attorneys, as many as 7 during this fiscal year. And so with the shortage of attorneys, we just haven't felt the shortage of legal assistants. However, we are fully staffed on paper. We have 4 law school graduates starting in my office between July and September. And so in July through September, we're going to feel the need for these 2 legal assistants we are short. My intention at first was to ask for these 2 legal assistants on next year's budget. However, then we're getting dangerously close to dealing with the problem and feeling the short staffing. Also, my office doesn't want to train 2 legal assistants at the same time. We would like the luxury of training 1 legal assistant and then the next. That way, when we have this wave of 4 and 5 attorneys starting in the summertime, we're ready to go and we're dealing with it. And again, we're not training 2 people at the same time because sometimes it takes months. And so that's largely the reason why my office is asking for 1 legal assistant now. I will reserve asking for the 2nd legal assistant into next year's budget. My office has a tremendous amount of savings due to unspent wages, again, because we've had a lack of attorneys. I believe it was in excess of $400,000. And so this request would be budget neutral for the remainder of this budget year. It would, of course, increase our budget for next year. But again, I was going to be asking for this position in next year's budget anyway. And so we're saving money. And so it's for those reasons that I'm asking for just 1 of these 2 legal assistant spots now before next year's budget.
Could we wait for a July 1st starting date?
We could, but again, we would like to train this person and have them up and running so that when the attorneys start, they're ready to go.
How many attorneys are starting July 1?
3. We have 3 attorneys starting July 1. We have 1 attorney starting, I think, sometime in September. And then we could possibly have 1 more starting in July. I just don't know yet.
Questions? No?
How much time does it take to train 1 up?
Well, ideally, it could take a month or 2. It just depends on the person.
Yeah.
We've had some people come into the office and we've gotten very lucky where everything clicks. They catch on extremely fast. And not only do they take, a little bit amount of time to train, but they don't take much supervision. We have hired some legal assistants where they take much longer to train, and then even after they're trained, we're still kind of supervising them. And so we just don't know until we hire that person.
Yeah.
But, that there's not much time between now and July. And so we very well could spend the better portion of that time training this 1 person.
Yeah. I understand. I mean, you start hiring more prosecuting attorneys, you need the support behind them. So.
Okay. Motion?
I move that we approve the request for 1 additional full-time equivalent legal assistant at the prosecutor's office.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Item 6 is request for step increases. Again, prosecutor's office.
Yes, as the board knows, there are 5 attorney pay bands, 1 through 5. I currently have 2 attorney 3s who have begun prosecuting much more difficult caseloads. They've gone from misdemeanors to felonies. Normally, that would give my office and myself a reason to consider promoting them from attorneys 3 to attorneys 4. I do not have any attorney 4 spots open right now, so that's just not an option. I could, of course, come to the board and ask to permanently convert 2 attorney 3 positions to attorney 4 positions. However, I'm not doing that. Instead, I'm asking to just move these two attorneys over a step each. I do think this is the better option. I think over the long term, a career, this would give them a lot more opportunities for growth, to reserve the possibility of going to a 4 later. These are two attorneys who've been in the office, I think, under 5 years, and so they have a long career ahead of them where they can move into the 4s and the 5 positions. But they are deserving of something now. They are handling much more difficult caseloads. And with that should come some recognition. And again, that's usually in the form of promoting them from a 3 to a 4. And I'm just not able to do that right now. And so I am seeking to move them over a step instead. One thing that's worth noting is this isn't my motivation in coming to the board with this request, but there is also a compression issue with these two attorneys. If they are able to move a step over now, it will resolve a compression issue that they are experiencing. But again, I did not want to come to the board with solely a compression issue. I wanted to come with a merit-based issue, and that's what this is.
So I think we entertained the same thing with Ann's people when they started handling more complex cases.
And again, this is budget neutral for this year. It, of course, would affect the budget next year, but yes.
Yes, provided you can hang on to a full staff,
Exactly.
which is almost unheard of nowadays, but.
And this, of course, I haven't heard any quote-unquote threats for these two attorneys to leave, but I think this would increase the chance that they would stay longer in their career.
Sure. Bill, questions, thoughts?
No.
I'm just curious, is this the result of an increased felony caseload?
Yes, I don't have numbers for the board today, but what we're experiencing is our felony prosecutors, and thank you for bringing this up, it's something I should have brought up, our misdemeanor attorneys, their numbers are somewhat low comparative to the years past. They still have busy caseloads. They're busy, don't get me wrong. They have plenty to do, but their numbers are lower than they have been. Felony numbers are higher than they have been. Depending on the complexity of the caseloads, I have some felony attorneys who are in 80, 90 cases each. I have some felony attorneys who are 40, 50 cases each. And so that's part of the reason why my office started having these two attorneys handle felony caseloads. Not only are they trained up, experienced, and able to handle the felonies, but I needed to find a way to relieve some of these felony attorneys who are handling 90 cases, transfer some of their cases to people like these two attorneys to kind of spread the misery, so to speak.
Sounds like a consequence of the massive growth that's going on here.
I would agree.
So, okay. I move that we approve the request for the step increase for the prosecutor's office.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Commissioner Matari,
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. All right.
Board.
Item 7, requests for bonus payments, prosecutor's office.
Thank you, Board. This is my final request. As the Board knows, last year, the Public Defender's Office made a similar request due to budget savings. I believe also my predecessor, Mr. McHugh, made a late fiscal year request for this, and it did not make the agenda. I'm resurrecting this. Again, we have over $400,000 in budget savings due to unspent wages. We have attorneys and employees in my office who have been with the county for a tremendous amount of time. Over the years, they've shown their dedication to the county and to the citizens. They've done a job well done. I believe they deserve some recognition, not to mention the fact that because of short staffing of attorneys and other employees, they've had to pick up a tremendous amount of slack. And so I would love to give them an alternative way of recognizing them other than a pat on the back and a thumbs up. I think they're deserving of a bonus. This is very strikingly similar to the bonuses that the Public Defender's Office got last year. They are in increments of $500, $500, $1,000, and $1,500. Unless I've missed somebody, it's going to cost the county $56,000. This is budget neutral because we have an excess amount of money in budget savings, and so this isn't going to be felt this budget year, and it won't be felt next year because this is a one-time request. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. again, some of these people who are getting the $1,000, hopefully if it gets approved, the $1,000 and $1,500, they've shown their dedication to the county. They haven't gone anywhere. I do understand that last year, when Public Defender's Office got these bonuses, I think they were given out incrementally. I would make the argument they should just be given out in one lump sum. If the board's not inclined to do that, I would ask that they be given out in $500 increments. So people who are only getting $500, they'd get the one payment. People who are getting $1,000 would get two $500 increments, and then so on to the $1,500. But again, I have employees in my office who've been here 30 years. The vast majority, over half of my office has been here 3 or less years. And so most of these people will be getting the $500 bonus. But the people who've been here a long time, I think they deserve more than $500. That's why I'm stepping it up to $1,000 and $1,500. And again, I think I mentioned this, but this would be budget neutral this year. And I just think that my employees are great employees. I want to show them that I recognize their hard work and dedication to the county and the suffering they've gone through because of our shortage of attorneys. We've all had to pick up the slack. And I think that these one-time bonuses would be a great way to show them that they've done a job well done.
Would you agree that the public defender has had more trouble attracting and retaining attorneys?
I think on paper, their numbers might show that. I haven't crunched the numbers. I think we've been equally facing problems with having people quit. I don't know how this would translate to answer your question, but I think we've been more successful at recruiting when we have vacancies than they have been. And there's a lot of factors that go into that I'm not going to speak of today, but
Sure.
we've had a lot of people leave over the years. I would just argue that I think for whatever reason, I think more people would like to be a prosecutor than a defense attorney.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's a lot of differences. It's not apples to apples when you compare the two. I just bring that up because I did vote for the incremental things before, but I have an issue this time for several reasons. Number one, we're halfway through the year, and the last few years we've been able to take all that salary savings combined and give bonuses to everybody. There are many, many departments in the county who have long-term employees who have all the same criteria that you're mentioning. They've had to take up extra work because of the people. I also have people who have maintained their employment, and they don't have this kind of resource to give their employees who are equally as deserving bonuses. So at this point, I'm not in support of it. We've already had a BOCC department who has not gotten support to bring these merit bonuses forward as well. So I rather see something that's a little bit more widespread throughout the county and not department by department, just because we can't apply it equally. So that's just my opinion on it.
Certainly, if I may comment on that, I completely agree with you, Commissioner. I would just like to point out again that there is well over $400,000 in budget savings from my office alone. This is $56,000, assuming I haven't missed anybody. There is a lot of money left over that I would argue should be dispersed throughout the county. I just don't think The other thing too is I think the Public Defender's Office got their bonuses last year even when all the county got bonuses as well. Mm-hmm. And so that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I certainly see your point, Commissioner Duncan, on that. And, usually when I look at bonuses, I like to look at individuals who've gone above and beyond, where you can be more specific in essence. I don't doubt for a second that the folks in your office work extremely hard and have had to pick up a lot of slack. But it's easier when it can be quantified so that the bonus can be commensurate with the effort that was put forth. So, for example, if someone normally works 40 hours, but they've been putting in 80 hours consistently for the last couple of months because they're picking up that slack, that to me would be certainly a very quantifiable event to suggest giving somebody a bonus. The alternative is that salary savings can become a a de facto way of earning more money because these positions are not there if it's used just that way. And it seems like, and I know that there's other departments that put in a lot of extra hours to pick up the slack because they've been short-staffed. And so I'd like to at least have instances of where people have, it's been quantified what they've done to look at any kind of a bonus, because in that sense, I would agree that someone should, especially in positions where overtime's not paid. Because we have other positions where if you work 80 hours in a week, you're going to get paid that for your time. I believe for a lot of your attorneys, that's not the case.
That's true. Our attorneys don't get paid overtime, their salary.
Yep.
Not to mention the fact that we have a lot of employees who are eligible for overtime, but we don't have a big overtime budget. And so
Yeah.
we don't want to get into the position where we're using our overtime and now we're asking for an increase of overtime. Instead, people are just working harder in the 8 hours they have. And so it's kind of a catch-22. I could very easily leave this meeting and then go tell everybody to work the 50, 60, 8 hours a week, and then we'll just go through the overtime budget and then we'll ask for more later. Instead, people have just been working hard, and this is the way I think they should be recognized.
Yeah. I would be more, I know that you're filling positions, so some of that relief is on its way. And I would be more open to entertaining this and agreeing to it if there were specific examples for people that really stood out. And then, of course, I think, where there's savings throughout the county, that should be dispersed to folks in the form of a bonus like it has been in the past, because everyone's been kind of picking that up. But if you had specific examples, I think I would certainly be open to looking at that.
Certainly. Can I ask a question? The other departments in the county who are short-staffed and have been picking up the slack with regard to their specific departments, I would assume they would have budget savings as well, and their department heads could make similar requests just for their department.
And thus 44 departments coming before us.
I understand that.
Yeah. And no, actually, there's departments who have been very overworked and they do not have salary savings at this point from their certain circumstances. But I hear you. And once again, I always lament having to argue with a lawyer. But here we are. So, Bill, thoughts, please?
Well, I agree with the prosecuting attorney. I think this should be passed. He's a man with boots on the ground in the department, and he knows who should have bonuses and who should not. So instead of trying to run his shop, I just as soon take his word.
So he's asked for everybody in all of his departments to get the bonuses. So, yeah, it does not sound like you have a support for two today. So I think that's where we landed on the bonuses. But thank you.
Well, thank you for hearing me out.
Yes. And we're not saying that they're not working hard and that they're not deserving. I'm just saying that I got, 800 employees who majority could fit into that category as well.
No, certainly, thank you very much. And I didn't mean for any of my comments to be interpreted that my office is working harder than any other office in the county either, so. Thank you.
All right, can we go back to item 1 real quick? Because I think it's going to be a pretty simple thing. So this is a step increase request, noxious weeds control, and our Parks and Waterways Director, Nick Snyder.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Thanks for the accommodation. I was stuck in a meeting. Hopefully this is quick. Commissioners, I don't typically bring forward a mid-year change. However, we had sort of a unique situation in where, for the sake of efficiency and to utilize our resources the best we could, we took our noxious weed superintendent and integrated him into maintenance activities during the winter months, really late fall into early spring, where his typical workload is much reduced in comparison with spring and summer. So in doing that, that caused him to essentially be doing everything a senior maintenance worker was doing, which is, again, a good benefit to the county, but it caused a parity issue. So I reached out to HR for some some recommendations and their thoughts on it. And while they supported certainly blending those two kind of positions together to maximize the benefit to the county, the issue is he's doing the same job that maintenance workers are 7 of the 12 months out of the year. So they recommended a step increase to sort of make sure that
Internally
there was
align.
yeah, so there was equality amongst the workers there, and that's why I'm before you. And I asked the auditor's office to provide a budget analysis, and it does cause an increase. Currently, the employee is at $24.72. He's at a step 4. They recommend, HR advises a single step increase, again, for parity reasons, bringing that employee up $1.06 per hour to the next step at $25.78. The overall budget impact is $1,252 for the remainder of fiscal year '23. And it would cause a $2,712 increase for next fiscal year. However, I wanted to point out that we do have a salary savings of $15,000 in fiscal year '23, so a $1,252 impact this year. So anyway, again, Commissioners, it's just to make sure the employee is being paid commensurate with doing the same work. So that's my request before you today, and
Questions?
thanks for your time.
Bill, questions?
No.
Okay. Thoughts? Motion.
Seems reasonable.
I move that we approve the request for superintendent step increase for noxious weeds.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye, motion passes. Item 9, Parker resolution discussion with the Sheriff's Office.
Good morning, Commissioners. Under Sheriff Brett Nelson, on behalf of the Sheriff's Department, I bring before you a resolution that was first authored and approved in 1994. At that point, a previous administration was hoping to, if you will, look out for the best interests of our employees at the time, and in doing so mirrored a state statute that entitled an injured employee the leave of absence while disabled without the loss of salary or benefits for a period not more than 1 year. This statute was specifically written for state law enforcement employees. At the time in 1994, the Sheriff's Office was trying to amend the same or extend the same offer to our own employees. This was later reapproved before the board in 2017. Due to our current abilities to fully staff the Sheriff's Office, and more importantly, to effectively run the business side, if you will, of the Sheriff's Office, while also complying and fully looking out in the best interest of our employees, I bring before you an amended resolution that, in agreement with legal and also HR, we believe is in the best interest for the county and the Sheriff's Office, and that is to limit the period of the full benefits to 6 months for purposes of, again, addressing our current staffing issues.
Okay. Thoughts, questions? Bruce?
Nope.
Okay, motion.
I move that we approve the Parker resolution.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks.
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. All right, motion passes. And I'd like to address number 11 because number 10 is going to require an executive session. So 11 is personnel changes meeting process, and this is kind of a continuation from our April elected officials meeting. So I don't know, Sylvia, Jennifer, you guys were going to touch base and see, so.
One of the items discussed at the elected officials meeting was the impact to the auditor's office in terms of creating projections or the work centered around that. So I'd like to defer to Jennifer.
Yes, we talked with Arrow and Brandy, and we're okay with that. Some of the guidelines that we're asking to include, though, is a memo, and then considering does it cause compression, a parity issue, or internal alignment throughout the county and or the department. And number 3, does it fall within policy 120?
Okay. So then I would also ask, do elected officials need any guidance on getting this on the agenda, or they don't need any commissioner liaison or anyone? They can just put whatever they want on the HR agenda. Is that your intent?
No, I think we discussed it so that instead of requiring 2 commissioners, it was just running it by 1
Okay.
and getting a nod.
So does it have to be their liaison or just anyone?
It should be anyone.
Okay,
The liaison is not in charge of them. It's just a
correct.
person that
I just
speaks
want
to
to,
them.
I want to be clear, because if it's the liaison, then that gives the elected official an opportunity to get turned down by 1 instead of 2. And so that's why I want to make sure that it can be anyone. So they'll be able to shop for their commissioner to get permission to put it on the HR agenda.
Well, they're kind of doing that right now, I think, with 2, so.
Yeah, but 2 still more than 1. So just want to be clear. Bill?
2 is more than 1? I'm shocked.
I know, even with the new math and Common Core.
Yep. No, I agree with Bruce. We should be able to do it with 1.
Okay,
'Cause
I
when
do.
When it comes to in front of the commissioners, we can always vote against it, even if,
it's just a lot of staff time I was trying to save, but
yeah.
it's okay.
I do have a question. The board had directed HR to only allow 10 items on the agenda. Do you still want that to be the rule for the process for our meetings? We do have 11 this time, but
Yeah, we already broke that rule, didn't we?
yeah, every once in a while it kind of floats, but not, there used to be 15, 20 items on our
Yes.
HR agenda.
Yeah.
They were
So it was
routinely hour and a
nice
half
to
to 2
do
hours.
some limitations.
Yeah. I still would be in favor of 10 items at this point.
I mean, this happened before my tenure, it sounds like, you know. Bill, what were your thoughts on that?
I think 10 items is arbitrary. Sometimes there needs to be an 11th or a 12th. And who's to say that we shouldn't be dealing with that?
Well, then, you know, there's another way we can do it, which is if you're past 10, you need 2 commissioners to get it on there.
That sounds reasonable.
Okay.
So 10 items, if it's going to exceed 10 items, the person who would want to be the 11th would have to get approval by 2 commissioners.
Yeah, so
Not
this,
the
that's
agenda.
only elected officials. Our board of, our BOCC departments have to have 2.
Oh,
We haven't
okay.
changed
Yeah,
that.
nope, that has not changed.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah, so BOCC departments have to have 2 commissioners. Elected officials can just have 1 commissioner. Unless it's an 11th item, then they have to have 2 commissioners. And anything has to have the memo, the compression, the alignment, all of those things that are requested by the clerk's office.
And considering that does it fall in
And
policy
policy
120?
120. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
What we'll do is draft the guidelines for the board and bring them back. But in terms of just finalizing it, so then we can post it on Casey Place. But we'll start with this process if you guys vote on it immediately.
Thank you. All right, I don't know that we need a motion. Okay. All right, now we're at item 10, and this is the separation and release agreement in our court security department. So I would entertain a motion for a 1B executive session.
I move that we enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061B.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
It's 11:10 a.m.
I move that we exit executive session 1B with staff to proceed as discussed.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Commissioner Matari.
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye. All right, public comment. Nope, hearing none. 11:10, meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you. And we'll start our next one in probably about 2 minutes.